Hey, if you want access to the transcripts and the show notes and the links talked about as part of this episode, you can go to Seven, so the word all spelled out, SEVEN health.com/311. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist and a coach and an eating disorder expert, and I help clients to fully recover. So 2 announcements before we get on with today's show. So 1, I'm taking on new clients at the moment. If you are someone who wants to reach a place of full recovery and would like support and guidance and help to get there, then I would love to support you in this way. You can send an email to info@7-health.com. And if you just put coaching in the subject line, I can send over the details of how we can work together. The second thing is, and I actually mentioned this on last week's episode, is that I'm now on Instagram in a fairly consistent way, and I'm genuinely getting into it. I have this love-hate relationship with Instagram or social media more generally. I haven't been on social media for a very long time, and it's really just been this year that I've got back into it a little bit, and really since August time that I've been doing it more. But I'm actually finding a way to do it where I enjoy it. And for me, a lot of the stuff that I put out through Instagram is like little mini blog posts, like little mini nugget of information. And I always had this mistaken belief that I wasn't very good at Instagram and I wasn't good at writing short posts, because so many of my podcasts like 2 hours long, or when I do a log post, it would always be this really long piece. But I've figured out a way of doing short, punchy messages, and yeah, really enjoying it. And so if you're not already following me on Instagram, then please head over. It's 7 Health Company, or at 7 Health Company, and there you can find all that, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. So on with today's show, and today it is a guest interview, and I'm speaking with Becky Freestone. So Becky struggled with anorexia and severe exercise compulsion for over 20 years, but has now made a full recovery. Since recovering, she's become a recovery coach and has been doing this for 5 years. She has a YouTube channel with over 300 videos for those where coaching is not feasible. She finds joy in helping others find hope again, and is so passionate about helping people who struggle with eating disorders know that they are not crazy and that they can absolutely fully recover. She especially sees a need to speak to those with restrictive eating disorders who don't fit the stereotypical body, and feels that this is one of the biggest hindrances she runs into when trying to help someone. And her theory is, if the symptoms are there, treatment needs to be the same regardless of body size. Becky adamantly believes that full recovery is possible, and with the right tools and determination, freedom is within the reach for anyone who wants it. So I have been aware of Becky for a really long time. She's actually someone who's been requested as a guest a lot by clients, by listeners. And so this is like well and truly overdue. And so as part of this conversation, I talk about Becky's backstory, or we go through it and look at her eating disorder, her recovery, and what's that's looked like. And then we just go through some of the topics that are most interesting for people, most pressing for people, people are most confused about or most concerned about. And yeah, just talk about all of these different aspects connected to recovery. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Becky Freestone. Hey, Becky, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for asking me to come.
Yeah, I've got to say, this is way, way, way overdue. You are someone who is frequently requested as a guest for me to have on the show. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to do this. I think what would be useful is, one, to go through sort of your story. I mean, the reason you're a recovery coach and you do what you do is because of your own eating disorder. So I think it would be useful to go through that. And then I spent the morning going through all of your YouTube videos and just like looking at the things that are most liked, most watched, what are the topics that people want to hear about the most, and think that we could then just have a discussion about all of those things.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you again for having me on. I'm excited.
Nice. And so I guess as just a starting point for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you want to just give like a mini bio on who you are, what you do, what training you've done, that kind of thing?
Yes, so I'm Becky Freestone. I had an eating disorder myself for about 20 years. And I am married and I have 4 kids. And I feel like I can say I was lucky enough to discover the approach that we'll probably be diving deeper into during this podcast. But I was lucky enough to find an approach to recovery that works for me. And it really made sense. And I had Tabitha Farrar as my recovery coach for a portion of my recovery. And just talking to someone that had personal experience was incredibly valuable to me, because up to that point, I didn't trust anyone. Not my parents, who loved me, would have done anything and did do anything right for me. Not my husband, who's incredibly devoted, kind, good person. Didn't trust him. I didn't trust the people in my life that I should have trusted all along. But I did trust someone who's speaking my language, right? Who's really inside of my head, who really understood it. And as I talked to you, I know you did not have an eating disorder, but, and I've said this before, I'm in awe at you're spot on. And the way that you describe people's experience with an eating disorder, I'm amazed at how knowledgeable you are. And that doesn't come natural for you. You are learning and researching and working with people and listening. So just, to me, that is, I didn't do anything to have that, right, other than deal with crappy eating disorder, but you put in a ton of work to understand people that struggle with them. So anyway, so that's how I became a coach. And it kind of just started out with I don't know, I guess there's some interest, I think I had done a couple YouTube videos. Tabitha and I were going to start a recovery center before COVID. We had curriculum for it. We had location for it. People had signed up for it. And then COVID hit. And shortly after that, I found out that I thought I was pregnant, and I was like, how am I going to do this? Okay, I'm going to figure it out. I'm still going to, make this work, because I'm committed to it, and we're working to make sure this happens. And then COVID hit, and although COVID was devastating and still awful, that people are dealing with the repercussions from it. But that was kind of the deal. It was okay, we actually are not opening our center. And as time went on, both of us kind of just continued to pursue coaching. And then the rest is history. Kind of, upon reflections, maybe a center would be, I maybe had a date and over my head, because I kind of feel like I'm drowning with 4 kids. And the coaching that I do now is a lot less than I did before Hazel. And so the center, if anyone wants to open a center with me and do most of the legwork, I would love that, because I think there is one, I definitely, there's a need for it, but I just, unfortunately, not at least anytime in the near future for me. But I love coaching and passionate about it. Yeah, I feel in some regards, my job is pretty straightforward. But then also, I think because each person's unique, the way in which I go about saying the same thing, is going to vary from person to person. What might help one person being said in a very very stern, bold way. For another person, it might be, they might just need a confidence boost, right? They might be so hard on themselves that maybe they just need some motivation. So anyways, coaching has been wonderful. And I live in Utah. I enjoy skiing. Ski season's coming up here in just over a month, and I'm excited for that. And my husband and I like to travel. We're going to Portugal this week without our kids. We took them to the Netherlands this summer, and I was a completely different experience. Taking my kids to the Netherlands, and also we visited Paris and Amsterdam. I went to Paris a couple of years ago with just my husband, and it was this great, dreamy, relaxing vacation, sitting at, cafes and just on our own schedule, and it was great. Then 2 years later, we go, and I have Hazel, who's at the time had just turned 4, and I had her on a leash, and I was so stressed out, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a rare occasion that we take them out of the country again until they're older. But going with him, I'm really excited for that. And I attribute a lot of that excitement to being able to recover, really genuinely having the freedom to do that, because before I wouldn't even considered it, shown any interest. Yeah, not have agreed to go for obvious and multiple different reasons. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be where I'm at now, and to be able to experience life in such a different way than I did. Yeah, many years previous that I started. So it gives me a greater appreciation for life and just for everyday mundane things.
Yeah. So, nice. Where in Portugal are you off to?
I honestly don't even know, Chris. I'm going with my siblings and their spouses and my parents. And Zach is the planner. He does spreadsheets. He does like, I mean, he's like, he loves to do that. And I like to be surprised. So I'm just showing up somewhere in Portugal. And I honestly don't even know. I could look at the itinerary, but I'm not. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
Nice.
Now
No, no.
so yeah.
One of my best friends lives in Portugal, and so he lives in Lisbon, and so I've been out a number of times, and it's
Oh, cool.
such an awesome place. Like the food is incredible, the people are super friendly. It's like stunningly beautiful. The water is
Yeah.
freezing, but if you can get over that, there's great surf. I mean, I've been out many times to play golf because it's got really good golf courses.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Cool.
highly recommend it. And for Europe, it's fairly reasonably priced
Yeah.
as a holiday.
Looks like
So
it's
yeah,
very cheap, actually. Like looking at excursions and stuff. My husband's like, oh, it's a great place to travel. So we'll
yeah.
see. I do know we are flying into it, so I know that much.
Okay, cool, nice.
So yeah, it'll
So
be fun. Yep.
awesome. So yeah, let's go back to focus a little bit on your early childhood and how that sort of then went into you ending up with an eating disorder. So what was food like growing up in your household? What was your relationship like with food as a young kid?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think I feel like I've talked about everything on my YouTube channel, but I've never talked about that. So I love that question. And actually made me think as you're asking, like, actually, my childhood was great. I had a really great childhood. I had 7 siblings. I have my youngest brother and sister both have Down syndrome, and I feel like they, from a very young age, always helped me to like keep kind of just things in perspective. I felt like they grounded me, and they're just like this joy in our lives, and I'm so grateful for them, and I still feel that way. Great example of just like neither one of them have ever cared about what they look like or their body, and they're the most confident people ever, and so loving and make everyone feel great, right? So,
Nice.
anyways, they're very inspiring to me, and I love them. But that was a part of my childhood is growing up with brother and sister with Down syndrome. And yeah, I have two very supportive parents, very involved, but not like overbearingly involved. We had very strict rules growing up. My faith has like very high standards and expectations. And for me, it was just all I knew. And I knew that it was keeping me from doing dumb things in life and going down bad roads. And I don't know, I guess I was a mature kid for my age who I was like, of course I would not drink in high school, or of course I would not date around if I wasn't serious. Like, I guess I would just, I don't know. So for me, that was great. I'm grateful, for that upbringing and having high morals and whatnot. As far as eating goes and food, I did have a mother who probably, yes, had some disordered eating. Never was diagnosed with eating disorder, but she would do like Jenny Craig. I don't know if you heard of
Yep.
like Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, all those like, things. And as a kid, I'd be like, why does she care so much? Like literally get over it. It's like she'd weigh herself every morning and she'd be in a bad mood if she didn't get to run. And if she did run, as I'm speaking, I'm like, yeah, definitely eating disorder, right? But
Yeah.
I was like, but she still was able to like, you know, take care of 8 kids and high functioning and whatnot. But that was definitely not the focus, right? But interestingly enough, you think, okay, so you probably have this orthorexic upbringing, right? With food disorder. Absolutely not. Like my mom never ate a fruit or vegetable. We would have like mushy, I don't know, like frozen cooked corn if we had a vegetable, or like, I don't even know, very soggy, overcooked broccoli with like nothing on it. Fruit was like pie, like apple pie. Like she did not have hardly anything. I remember asking her as a kid, Mom, could you just put like a fresh apple in my lunch for school? Just like other kids have like oranges and apples and then could you just put like a fresh apple in my lunch? And that was like a big thing that I was asking. But we always had everything around. There was never did I have to ask for food. There was always like candy bowls out when friends would come. They always wanted to eat at our house because we had the best food. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, this is just how we live. This is just normal. So it was always, I had that environment where it was just like always there and it
Yeah.
never felt like off limits. Maybe I didn't put the connection together. Well, my mom's really concerned about her weight. Maybe I should eat that. I never really thought that way, just like eat freely. Food was something that I had a big appetite as a kid and I never thought twice about what I ate. And I thought my friends in high school that were on diets were dumb. I guess I was so dumb that they would care about, their weight so much they wouldn't just go get burgers for us at lunchtime with all of our friends. I was very much just like a very normal, healthy minded, confident. I played volleyball and I was very just comfortable and confident in my skin. Last person you would have ever thought to have an eating disorder. And then I went to college. I played volleyball at Brigham Young University's college here in the States within like 6 months of my freshman year. And I do recall having that fear of like the freshmen, just people talking about that. And I'm just like, was it that bad? Like everyone's like, don't get the freshman 15. It just sounded like this terrible, awful thing. And I never really even thought about my weight.
Yeah.
And even that I didn't like I didn't think, oh, okay, I have to be careful. But what happened is I just sort of like the stress of playing a college sport and trying to keep up with good grades. I was very like disciplined and wanted to get straight A's, and I had put so much pressure on myself to do everything well,
Yeah.
that food kind of just fell in the background. Like it just sort of was a oversight. If I didn't have time, all of a sudden I was like not having time for lunch, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like I was so stressed out and so busy. On top of like practices before school or classes, and then practices in the afternoons, and so my deficit sort of happened unintentionally.
Yeah.
But then as it started to sort of happen unintentionally, that's when I started paying attention to what other girls were eating. Right. Then all of a sudden I found this interest. Ironically enough, I found this interest. I'm like, why is it all the girls are like eating salads? And why is no one getting like seconds, thirds, fourths plates of food? Like I was used to like before my eating disorders first couple of months, I was sitting with football players and we'd have eating contests, and it's just so hilarious. Like, like I honestly did not care at all. But again, as I unintentionally fell in deficit, you see the mindset shift. All of a sudden I cared what girls were eating. I was trying to eat salads too. And I was thinking like, gosh, you know what? Like maybe I don't need to eat this much. Why do I eat so much? And all of a sudden I hated my body. It happened so fast for me. It really felt like when I talked about a switch went on and off.
How fast? When you say it happened fast, is it like a weeks, months? What is fast?
A couple of months, like I said. So from the time I went to college, what, like end of August, September maybe, to Christmas, I had
Okay.
most definitely come home for Christmas and was like, my brain's been hijacked. I'm being hide this from my family. And it was really hard. I was my best friend kind of watched things unfold, and she essentially lost the person I grew up with, like all through our school years, and didn't know what was going on, and it just really like put such a strain on our friendship. Feedback now, it must have been very hard for her to watch. Yeah, I remember I recall feeling like I have no idea why I'm doing the things I'm doing. I just know I have to. I just know I have to get up in the dark and run before practice.
Yeah.
I just know that I have to not eat, the foods I used to eat. It was just like something had taken over and I had no control. So for me, that's how quickly it happened.
And at that point, were you recognizing like, oh, like this is an issue and I need to deal with it? Or more like I was just sucked in and it just felt like this is what I just have to do, and there isn't really an alternative. And yeah, that like it wasn't setting off red flags for you.
It was at the time I knew that I felt different, my brain was different, but I also felt like at that point I did not understand what other people were saying. I was just quote unquote, I felt healthier. I felt leaner. I'm now eating healthier food. Like none of this is bad. Why is everyone freaking out? And I remember getting the diagnosis that I had anorexia, and my parents refused to accept it. It was just like, no, she doesn't. Again, rightfully so. Like they knew me, right? Sent me out to college as like this totally very confident, healthy girl. And within months, so like your daughter has anorexia. And like, no, she doesn't. She has celiac. She has this. Let's test her for that. There's no way that's what's happening, right? And so I kind of course, conveniently was like, yeah, that's probably it too. I don't have an eating disorder. And I kind of rolled with that, but deep down inside, in hindsight, I'm like, I knew something was up. I knew I wasn't eating enough. I knew I was working out a ton, right? I still didn't think though that I looked like someone who had an eating disorder, right? Which is irrelevant. We all know that, and we'll probably talk more about that. But at the time, that was a thing that I used to keep me kind of in denial, essentially, that there was something going on. And then that ended up unfolding over the course of 2 seasons, where I became like a medical liability, and I was asked to redshirt. Like I was asked to sit out for a year in volleyball, and I could take a medical scholarship and just be done with volleyball and just still pay for the rest of my college. Or I could take like a year off and then try to get back, recover, get better, and then get back. And I remember being just absolutely mortified. Like that was my entire identity. Everyone just knew me as like, oh, Becky plays volleyball. My parents, this is Becky, she plays volleyball. Volleyball, Becky just went together. And so when that kind of fell apart, and then that was my dream to get a scholarship to the school. So when that sort of fell apart and it's taken from me, I wanted nothing to do with it. I just said, I'll take a medical red shirt because I'd found another, essentially, like I found another lifestyle. Like this is way running and starving myself. I'm not willing to give this up. So I guess if I have to do what you want me to do to play volleyball, I won't. Like that's how sucked in I had gotten.
And
And
that's
I,
like so the case for so many people. It's like as life falls away and all of these things that used to be important to you disappear and become not important for you, rather than that being this pivotal moment where you're like, right, this has to stop. Like this is insanity. It's right. I'm just holding on to the eating disorder with even more of a grip. Like this has now become my new thing. This is the most important thing, and it's that's so hard to see. Whereas like this thing that you are like holding on to with a death grip is the death of you, like is the death of the quality of life you used to have, and yet you're holding it onto it like it's your savior.
Yeah. The problem with it and why it's so dangerous and very hard to treat, as you know, is you're completely blindsided. Like you're completely blindsided as it unfolds. And it kind of, takes residence in your brain, but they are also blinded in making any kind of decisions or any pursuing any kinds of values or, goals or dreams that you had. Again, she said, just like completely blinded from anything other than just like right here, right now. So I remember walking away from that being like, I'll just be the most fit person. Nobody on campus will see me and not see that I'm not taking my health serious. Like thinking about it, and I was like, how sad and secure, lost I was. But that was like my identity. Fine, I won't play volleyball, but I will be ripped and I'll be zero body fat percent. That is what I'm going to pursue now. And it was just like in this very unfulfilling giant waste of time. Right now, I can say that easily where I'm sitting now. But if you're in that spot, I totally understand that this feels like everything to you. Everything is on the line, and losing this could, be very damaging or threatening to your life. And when in fact, the thing itself is what's completely robbing you of life. I remember calling my mom after having a meeting with the coaches. And I told her, Mom, I can't play volleyball anymore. And I told her my options, and I told her I'd walk away. And she's like, yeah, you'll regret that decision the rest of your life. And that stuck with me. And that I think perpetuated and kept me stuck in that place of just like, I'm such a failure. I'm such a failure. I can't believe that happened. It can't happen. And then again, just overcompensating in this area of like fitness and health and what I thought was health.
Yeah, because you double down. It's like the pot committed fallacy. Like I'm doubling down. I'm going to prove everyone that this was a mistake by going this other route.
Yep, totally. And tried to pretend like I was so happy and it was so fulfilling. And at the same time, I'm losing friendships. My siblings didn't want to talk to me. No one standing around me. I knew they talked behind my back and were like, Becky is absolutely terrible to be around. I know I was. And as I felt more and more isolated, because again, I was not fun to be around, again, dove deeper and deeper and deeper until really it's all I had. Right. And I work with clients like that where they're so isolated, they're so alone. I have no friends in life. They're 50, 60, no family connections, nothing, because it's taken all of that away and the families are removing themselves from it, feeling helpless. And so, anyway, so years went on. I finished college. I met my husband when I was in a better state. Essentially, to wrap this up, we don't need to go on forever. Course of 20 years, I was up and down, up and down, up and down. I had no idea what rewiring was. When I say up and down, it's meaning my weight, right? My weight went up. Maybe I was functioning at a slightly higher place where I could connect a little bit more. Still very much on meal plans, still very much exercising, all these things, that I didn't understand needed to be addressed. So when I met my husband, I was in what I consider a better place. And then shortly after we got married, I hit the most rock bottom I'd ever been. It was a huge life shift for me. Obviously, marriage is, especially where we had not lived together before. So this was like a completely new experience for both of us. And yeah, I'd been inpatient at one point after a miscarriage, and just kept trying therapist after therapist, dietitian after dietitian. So much money and time and hope was poured into really, for you, quite futile efforts, right?
Yeah.
Those were things that really got me nowhere. But if I was talking to a therapist and a dietitian weekly, I was working on recovery. And so I continued doing that.
So
Finally,
let's pause there just for a second, because I'd love for you to just share what were some of the things that you did as part of that with either the therapist or with dietitian that you think were a big mistake. You're like, please don't waste your time on this, because I don't think it's valuable to be spending your time in this way.
yeah, awesome. Very good question. Well, one thing that was great about therapy was they very rarely talked about eating more food, right? So it's like, well, you have an eating disorder and you don't want someone telling you to eat more food. And you can say you're in recovery because you're talking to a therapist. It's like, that's a safe place for you. You can talk about your parents and the trauma that they caused you. And though some people do experience trauma or not, I don't think it's related to eating more food to rewire your brain out of eating disorder. And so the therapist or therapy that I had was, if nothing else, enabling and quite triggering, right? Because there would be talk about like, ensuring that they won't let me get fat, making sure, that I was prioritizing my health. I mean, things that is like, oh my gosh, so damaging, not even just like a neutral position, but like quite damaging, not all, but some, my experiences. And dietitians were, I sit down in the first meeting and they go over what are like, the macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, and a fat, and what each one did, was functioning in my body, and what amounts I should have at each meal. And oh my gosh, at the beginning, I took that serious. I was like, okay, this is the way, I got to learn more about this and that. And probably the last 15 years, I was like, this is all a load of crap. And I know it's not going to get me anywhere, but I don't know what else to do. Right. So I just sign up for another one and I get another meal plan and I get excited about new dietitians and then a different meal plan. And it was just like, again, really unfortunately not helpful for me.
Yeah.
And
never was because it just wasn't enough food. Like as a minimum, it just
so much
food.
The unrestricted eating and stop suppressing your body weight was not even a thing. If anything, it was the opposite. It was like, here's a meal plan to make sure you don't get out of control, right? Because you do need more food, but we don't want you to eat so much that, you're having another issue. I mean, that's talked about all the time. Even in treatment, I remember they got me to what they considered a healthy weight for me, which, by the way, is significantly under what I weigh now. Significantly under what I weigh now. I was discharged at that weight. And at the same time, they cut and reduced my meal plan significantly. Well, the meal time before they even reduced it, I was still starving. I was going to bed hungry every night. I felt incredibly restricted, super messed up in my head because my brain hadn't changed much at all what my body had. I gained a lot of weight in treatment. And it's just a recipe. Like if you're going to put weight on someone and not address the rewiring, bad things happen. It doesn't end well, right? Nobody's staying there for years and years and years. Usually it's just a quick slide right on back into the eating disorder. And that's why it's so imperative to address the way that person thinks around food, body, and movement.
Yeah. Totally. Because otherwise, if you're just in a bigger body and you have the same level of disordered thoughts, why are you going
to
it's like
right, not even really there's no upside. It's almost like revenge, or sort of like you try that again, we're going to grab even tighter, right? It gets an even tighter grip on you. Like, no way, no how will I ever go down that road. Now it's terrible for me. That's my experience after inpatient treatment. And so, honest thing, like anyone who's married to someone and stays married to someone with an eating disorder, don't take offense to this if you're listening and you have an eating disorder, you're married. But seriously, the person who's living with you is an absolute saint. I've done it. I am not as good of a person as he is. I just don't know how I think. And I really think he was a huge part in my recovery when I finally recovered, because that last attempt at recovery, he actually was not involved at all. Like at all. I remember telling him I'm going to try this method. And he's like, I've been telling you that all along. He said, I've been telling you to do that all along. He has a medical background. He's a physician. And so like I probably should have trusted him. He's like, that is what I've been telling you forever, but I'm so glad you discovered this on your own. Good luck. Go for it. Right. And I would tell him about like things I did or whatever, but I was not calling him. Like, do you think I should do this? Do you think I'm going to do this like that? I didn't talk about any of that with him. And then he knew within like a week, he's like, something's different about you. You're going to do this. I'm like, I'm going to do this. Like he knew this is happening and he did not have to have her. I did not need his permission. It felt like I knew he loved me unconditionally. And this was for me. I wanted to recover. And the gift that I was able to give him through recovery was like priceless. Being able to see him and have his wife back is the happiest like I've ever seen him. It was so awesome. And so that I would say is probably one of the things that meant the most to me that I got out of recovery was genuinely just like giving my husband a spouse that he can connect with and, have experiences with. So anyways, that is my upbringing and where I'm at now.
Really? No. So if we do the very abridged version of what your recovery looked like, what was that like? And I mean, like, recovery in earnest, the last attempt that was the one that was actually meaningful and made this difference for you. What were the components of that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, what was different about that last attempt at recovery
Yeah.
was I did things that I was never willing to do before, like stop exercise completely. It was something that I had tried to go about over 100 different ways, but giving up exercise completely was not one of them because I just was unwilling to do that up to that point. So that was different. I went cold turkey. One of the biggest differences was I felt like I had received permission unrestrictedly. And when I heard someone speaking to my hunger and that was normal and that no wonder you want to like feast day in and day out all day long, all night long, because you're really, really hungry. I was like, yeah, I am. I can't believe someone else has felt that too. Right. And responded to it and is still alive. Like it was just this like aha moment. So for me, understanding I can go way above that meal plan was highly motivating for me because I realized maybe in doing so, maybe I could get somewhere eventually.
Yeah.
Right. Because just staying on a meal plan, knowing that you're not getting anywhere and you're still just restricting, is like, why on earth would I be willing to gain weight? Why on earth would it's same brain and just in a bigger body? I'm not doing that because at that time I was extremely afraid of weight gain. But when you're actually eating everything that you want and you're changing your brain, it's like, maybe I am willing to at least explore that because I can see a way out here. And so that was very different for me. I stopped seeking permission. That was another huge one. Stop seeking permission to do what I knew I needed to do in recovery, right? Which was rest and eat. To be super bold, to go and get that pizza randomly at 3:00 in the afternoon because it sounded good and not having to tell anyone about it, right? I did not record my recovery. I did not put it out there on Instagram. I just was doing it for me.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge one for me. And I've had past clients who have Instagram accounts, or I have clients who talk about other people's Instagram accounts. And though there might be some value in it, I would say focus all of your attention on recovering and then get out online and help other people recover. But I just think it's not linear. It's up and down, highly triggering for people watching. And that's my 2 cents about if you're in recovery for multiple reasons. I think you focus on your recovery, get yourself in a really good place, and then help other people do the same.
Yeah.
So
I do definitely agree with you there. I think it makes it so much more difficult when you're trying to do this as a form of content creation and having anyone who wants to know about it following you. And look, it's not that there haven't been people who have recovered in that vein, but I think it's a real survivorship bias, and you're much more aware of the 1 or 2 or 3 people who've done that versus the many, many hundreds and thousands who tried that and have failed miserably. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on. Like, don't make this any harder than it needs to be. Like, recovery is already hard enough. Why add another more challenging thing on top of that just doesn't need to be there?
Right. And a huge variable. You don't know if people are going to comment, and that could completely throw you over the edge. You're not exactly emotionally incredibly stable when you're in recovery. And so putting yourself out there for trolls to attack you also is not helpful. For me, when I'm talking to somebody and they start a sentence with, well, so-and-so on Instagram, or but this person on Instagram, for me, I literally am like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't have any idea who this person is or what they're doing on Instagram. But you got to focus on your own recovery, right? Like, you don't know what is actually going on with this person who is on Instagram that you think is doing it this way. You tried that way before, remember? You tried that way. You tried that way. You tried that way. Remember how you didn't get anywhere, So it's like you kind of have to circle back. But that is something that is like talked about more than I would like to have to talk about in a coaching session. I want to talk to you proactively. Like, how are we going to be intentional here? What are we changing? How are you going to accomplish this thing that, you've been really struggling with, that's holding you back? But conversations like that, I feel like they're a bit futile. So yeah, I think, I don't know. Oh, difference in, okay. The last thing, I remember what you asked. I forgot where we were going and what question you had asked. the last thing I'll say that was very different about recovery this last time was I don't know, had a fire inside of me. I wasn't at my rock bottom. It's not like I was like hit rock bottom. It was like, I don't know, I was on death's door. But I was, fed up with my eating disorder, and I saw what it was taking from my family and myself. What I told myself is I will, at 300 pounds, I will reassess if I still don't feel like I've rewired. That was what I told myself, because I knew that that was probably a good window, a wait to allow myself to feel like, okay, eat all that you want. Let's test this theory. Let's see if there's actually like systems in my body that can tell me when I'm actually full. And my brain shuts off that I don't want. Is it even possible? I'm curious. Like I really just wanted to experiment. And I knew I was going to continue to pursue whatever approach I needed to. If I needed to shift or change things, I would, but I wasn't going to stop until I had found experience that freedom. I wanted to live, not afraid of it. I wanted to wake up in the morning and just be able to choose what I wanted to do and not be a slave to my eating disorder anymore. And so, yeah, being willing again, going back to doing things you've never been willing to do, but getting like the greatest reward you've actually ever received in any attempt at recovery.
Yeah. Also, and I think you would run the other experiment for 20 years. Like you knew that one. Like, let's do another one, and let's do another one where you really do test it out for a significant either amount of time, or you said, okay, once I get to this weight, which from where you started is a huge amount of weight for you to gain. It's not that every person in recovery has to set that as the upper limit. It's just for you, that seemed like, cool, that's a good amount of room for me to run this experiment.
Genetics. Yeah, I knew for my genetics and just kind of my history before eating disorder. I thought that's a fair window to put myself in. However, if you're in a much larger body struggling with restrictive eating disorder, please don't hold on to that number and be like, well, that's the number she said. Like, no, I probably shouldn't have even said that number. But my point was, give yourself, however, I don't know, 1,000 pounds, like just some number where you're like, okay, I am going to continue moving forward. One thing that I think really helped shift my mindset, and I talk about this with clients, if you were in a game against the entire world and you're trying to be like huge money's on the line to be the person who can eat the most food, I don't know, for 6 months, we'll say, what would you do different? Would you wait to eat breakfast until 10 in the morning? Would you be, I don't know, choosing a safer thing at a restaurant? You would like optimize every waking moment because there's, $5 billion on the line if you win this, and if you win this game, and it's like all of a sudden everything you do, you're finding solutions to things that we're talking about in session. You're like, I don't know how to don't know how to do this. If that was on the line, I think you'd figure it out, right? If you had that mindset, you had that goal of winning this, I think that you would be able to do things you didn't think you could do. And so that shifts someone from a timid, scared, am I eating too much? I don't know. I feel like I should weigh myself to make sure I'm not, or I feel like I'm eating too much. Is this normal? Do other people eat? It changes that entire mindset into this, like, I'm unstoppable. And then no one can keep me from winning this. I can actually do this. So that's something that kind of like a visual, I don't know, that I very much like analogies and like having something I can like relate to that can help me feel, okay, yeah, that makes sense logically here. And then I can apply this to this person who's in the eating disorder community is a harder time talking logically about, the disordered thoughts. So
yeah, for sure. And you said at the beginning, like I've never had an eating disorder, but I did intentionally do this. There's a podcast that I put out a while ago of running an experiment where I did an overeating experiment to see what would happen if I really intentionally tried to eat a ton of food. And I knocked up against the same thing that you described there. Like, okay, I can't get in the amount of energy that I need when I'm consuming more of these vegetables. So that we're removing that thing out. Okay, I changed everything about the way that I ate, and maybe the way that I did it would be different to someone in recovery, because I was knocking up against the fact that like my body was telling me to not eat this amount of food. Like it was screaming at me, like, just stop. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to find a way to force this in. And yeah, I did. I changed everything I ate to be able to do that. And if that's your mentality of, I'm going to figure this thing out, it's amazing what you can change and how out of the box you can get in terms of your thinking when that becomes the goal that you're after.
Right. Yeah. So then usually what it does is it highlights excuses, right?
Yeah.
When you do this, it's highlighting these excuses that are like, oh, but I can't do it because of this, or I didn't have time because of that, or oh, well, I wanted to get this done before I had my meal, or all those things are like, oh, but if this was on the line, actually, yeah, duh. Obviously, I'd recover or I'd prioritize eating, right? And
Yeah.
that's how I want you to still recover it. Prioritize recovery. This is like a really big deal.
Yeah.
So,
Because someone already knows how to do that. Because if we look at the disordered behaviors, doesn't matter what's happened in your day, you found a way to go and do your exercise. Like you have figured out, like, house can be on fire and we're still figuring out a way that I get out and do
running around the house that's on
like you
fire. Yeah.
like. And so, because I had this conversation with a client who sometimes she's at home, sometimes she's traveling, she's like, oh, it's just so up in the air, it can be so hard to keep up with the consistency with the recovery actions. And I'm like, but you exercise every day when you're away. She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, so you find a way to make it to a gym every time you're away because that's a priority. So if you can do that, you can also do the recovery things. It's just like you've got to
Right.
prioritize that in the same way. So for most people listening, they know how to do this. It's not that I just couldn't figure that out. You do. It's just prioritizing a different thing.
Mm-hmm. In preparation, right? Like if in fact this person's like, I am like dead set on exercising every day, right? Clearly not like really working on the exercise compulsion if they're actually in recovery, but like where there's a will, there's a way, right? So preparing it, packing shoes, if you need to bring an extra bag to take your workout clothes in, researching which places have gyms, where's the closest gym. You're putting a lot of time and effort into making sure that happens. How much time and effort are you putting into, like you said, making sure you have food available at all times, everywhere you're going? That's possible. You can put a fanny pack around your waist and have it. So there's never excuses. And so, yeah, I think that that's something that mindset, you have to feel that shift. And when you feel it, it's like, this is happening. This is definitely happening. And I'll figure out a way to do it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to just turn to the different topics that I think are really relevant. And I'm going to kind of hit these in order of what gets asked the most or seems like the most important through to the things that are least important, just depending on how much we get through with time. So I think the idea or concept of going all in seems to be a very big thing. And so I'm going to just ask a very general question, and then we can get into specifics afterwards. But yeah, tell me your thoughts on this concept of going all in and what that looks like for you in your recovery, but also how you work on this in terms of your clients.
yeah. And I'll try to be more articulate here because I can, I'm long winded and we're almost at an hour. So I'll try to be short and sweet here. In answer to this question, I think about now you're stranded on this island when you're trying to get to shore, and it's a swimmable distance. And one person is like, hey, point A to point B, I'm going to jump in and swim as fast as I can. It's my best chance of getting to shore. The other one's like, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to tread water. Tread water. I could tread water. Let's see if I could just tread water all the way across. Just slow and steady, tread water. To me, I'm going to tire out. I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, that's very inefficient. Why would you do that? Just swim to shore. And to me, it's the same thing as like people who are going slow and steady. You are putting yourself in so much danger. You are putting yourself in a very vulnerable state where you're poking out a bully. You're poking out this eating disorder. And then you're backing down, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to eat more. Oh my gosh, I'm going to restrict now. I'm going to compensate. I'm going to eat more, but I'm going to exercise. And it's just aggravating your eating disorder. And so when you're doing that, well, guess what happens? You start reverting back to and acting out on the thoughts that you're having, your eating disorder is generating. Whereas if you're like, okay, everything's going, my entire day is being flipped upside down. It's going to look completely different. I'm not allowing any of my decisions to be influenced by my eating disorder. It's amazing how quickly your brain will learn I am in control. My eating disorder is not me, right? But when you're kind of, like playing on both teams, eating disorder usually, always actually will win that game, always. So you have to pick a team, and you cannot be trying this one foot in, one foot out. Let me see how long I can tread water for. It's exhausting. It's so exhausting. And so if you're doing the same thing you've done over and over and over again in recovery, hoping that again something else is going to happen different this time, it's not. You're going to get the same result. We've all all heard the definition of insanity. And essentially that is what's happening when someone continues to try to do the same thing over and over and over again. So if you haven't already tried all in, I encourage you to try it. Because for me, when people truly are doing it and they're really committed, extremely successful, very, very high rates of success, freedom, gratitude for themselves for doing it, right? Excitement back in life, feels fulfilled. Like so many wonderful things come when someone's brave and pursues that. Whereas when I see people with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, they're not getting very far. In fact, they're getting really frustrated. So that's is it to be said that no one can recover if they don't go all in? I can't speak to that. I've never worked with anyone who's been able to do that didn't go all in. But I'm sure there's someone out there. And also, what's the definition of recovery for that person, right? What's the definition of fully recovered for that person?
Yeah.
For me, my definition changed over time. And so what I thought was recovered when I met my husband was not recovered. Being fully recovered is really not being influenced by that eating disorder anymore. So,
yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, a couple of things with that. I think when as you talk about like you got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or I do this recovery action and then I compensate in some way, the reality is like from a physiological standpoint, like eating disorders, so much of it is driven by biology. As you talked about with your experience, once you got into this energy debt, even though it was done in an unintentional way, this switch just gets flicked and you think and feel and believe and perceive completely differently. And what happens is if I'm giving myself a little more food and then I'm upping my exercise, like you're not actually changing the physiology in any meaningful way. You're having this huge increase in your anxiety because it feels like, oh, I'm taking this action, but then you're not seeing any upside from it. And I think that you do that long enough and you come to the conclusion of like, recovery doesn't work for me. It's too hard. And so, yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you in terms of the going all in, because I think the more you're then making those big changes, the more that you're constantly reinforcing the idea of, yeah, I can have these eating sort of thoughts, but I don't need to act on them. And so, yeah, I'm definitely of that opinion as well. And look, I think with the all-in piece, sometimes people can inch their way up to it. And I say inch their way up to it, meaning that they're still making big changes to start with. It's just that, okay, it's not necessarily overnight that everything goes from 0 to 100. I think definitely get to that place.
I agree.
But in terms of like, let me add in half an apple today and then next week I'm going to, like, that definitely does not work.
Yeah, I would agree. Rarely do I get a client who's just nailing it. First week, it's like, I didn't restrict once. Yeah. I didn't even, not lower level. Nothing. I mean, it takes a couple of weeks to be hyper aware of where it's popping up, right? You're usually not paying attention for recovery of like, oh, that's disordered. I shouldn't park that far away and walk into the store. Like, that's just what you're doing. That's your life. When you enter recovery and you're really like committed to all in, there's a learning curve. And there's some time where you have to be like, wow, I didn't realize how much this was influencing all these things. And you're having to kind of each day, and so I think it's so important, the daily checking in with yourself, modify, change. Okay, I got to tweak this. I got to do this. I need to change this each day so that, again, maybe in a week or two, at the most, I really think you can kind of see the light and see what needs to happen to be all in. But yeah, I rarely is like have 1 30-minute session with someone and they're like, done, I got it. I'm all in and I'm not looking back. I mean, it's definitely, there's a process there, but the mindset of like, I am doing this and I'm willing to learn from my mistakes and make changes and corrections. That's essentially how I usually am seeing that go. So yeah.
Nice. I know you talked about it somewhat already in terms of the weight gain piece, but yeah, when thinking about this, what are some of the things that come up most in terms of people's challenges, or what are some of the analogies or ways that you guide people through this part?
I encourage people to make a rule for themselves that they cannot, when they're focusing on rewiring, any word or any thought to do with weight gain is not allowed. So when weight gain pops in, you're changing that to rewiring. So it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how much I've been eating. So I'm going to gain so much weight. It's like, oh wait, I said the word weight. So I'm going to take that as my cue. I'm rewiring. I'm focusing on rewiring. I'm only allowed to focus on rewiring, because if you're trying to focus on rewiring and also trying to control your weight gain, you're not going to be successful. It's not, those two don't go hand in hand, right? What can I do right now to rewire? What have I done today that's really solid rewire? You just start like completely like diving headfirst into that focus on what are my actions, my behaviors? What is going to help me get out of this fear that I have, the fastest? And so I think a lot of it is controlling those thoughts. And then also the big thing is not reacting to your emotions. Guilt, shame, fear, regret, all of those things are going to lead to, oh my gosh, I'm so big. I've gained so much weight. What am I doing? I need to fix this, right? Uncomfortable emotion, fix. Uncomfortable emotion, fix. And so when someone's having an uncomfortable emotion, same thing as the thought process, these words, these buzzwords like weight gain or body or whatever, over here, we translate that into rewiring. And then we have this thought of like, what was I just talking about? Weight gain. And then I would say similar, emotions and reacting. Sorry.
Yeah.
This happens sometimes. So when you have these emotions, you're going to practice the skill of not trying to fix them, right? So I feel extremely uncomfortable. I really don't like this feeling of crawling out of my skin. I really don't like this feeling. I do not like this feeling of like, I just ate way too much and I want to get rid of it. I don't like this feeling. And catching yourself from that thought to the action of you being out on a walk, right? Or you deciding that you're having a salad for dinner now, you're catching the thought immediately when you feel the uncomfortable emotion. That's your red flag. This is very uncomfortable. There's a reason. So my brain's changing. And I've wired my brain to think one way that thought it was safe. And now I have to teach my brain that actually that wasn't the right way to think. Actually, that wasn't safe for me. Actually, it's not good for me. So of course my brain's pitching a fit, and that's where those uncomfortable emotions are coming from. So much of this is going on in our head that if we can gain control of our thoughts and our emotions and detach them from our actions, you can be successful. Much easier said than done, but it is a skill that you can practice.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with you on all of that. And for me, I use a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy. I think that can be really helpful in terms of creating that distance between yourself and your thoughts, and recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts. Just because I had a thought doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean it's a value of mine. It doesn't mean that it's something that is meaningful to me. It doesn't mean I need to give it attention. And so ways of being able to recognize that when those thoughts came up. And then the same with the emotion space. Like we so often when there are uncomfortable emotions, there is this instant knee-jerk reaction of, I've got to fix this. I've got to change it. I've got to put a cork in this. We need to have this go away, as opposed to one, recognizing, hey, I can be with these emotions. I can create room for them to be here. I don't have to do anything to get them to go away. But two, can I use a level of discernment here to recognize, does this emotion feel appropriate for this situation? And one of the ways I think this can be really useful is make it not about you. And so like, let's imagine that your child, your son, your daughter had a second sandwich at lunch. Would you want her to be feeling guilt and shame? Would you think that that is an appropriate emotion? And if she wasn't feeling that, would you feel that she's missing out, that that emotion should be there? And most people are like, okay, no, that's definitely not what I want for them. I don't want them to have that reaction. Okay, cool. If that's the case for them, that's also the case for you. And so you can use the discernment of, I know this emotion is here, but it doesn't make sense why this emotion is here. My brain is misfiring, and it's misfiring because of being in an eating disorder. It could be to do with cultural reasons or what we hear in diet culture and all that, but there can be a recognition of, this is misfiring for how I would want this to be for someone I truly love. And so totally. I think that that's a workaround, because so often it's like, well, I wouldn't want this for someone else, but it's different for me. It's like, no, it's not different.
Yeah, I'm different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that's a great tool to use too. And I think sometimes when I say, or when you hear the word like ignore emotions, that's different from don't react to emotions, right? You can acknowledge those emotions are there, but engaging in them and then trying to fix them is not going to be beneficial, right? Accepting them and being like, this is a package deal that comes with rewiring and I signed up for it. And so we're going to sit through this, is going to be much different than just like pretending you don't have those emotions, right? And essentially that's where we try to fix it. I don't want to feel this. I'm going to go. as far as weight gain, I feel like there's different conversations and different stages of recovery. This is the
For
last
sure.
thing I'll say about weight gain. So what we're talking about now is what I initially will talk about at the beginning, when someone's, really scared of this initial weight and they thought this should be over by now. This is a really common thought. That's where I start to dig a little deeper into like, what would it even be like for you to be in a body that you in the past would have, deemed as totally inappropriate. But what if you actually liked it? What if you're actually confident? What if people still like you? And kind of just start asking these questions. And it's like, these are thoughts that have never even crossed their minds. Their brain's never even gone to these little corners of like, a possibility. I could do that. It's like, these are things you can actually pursue. And it helps the person to kind of like, I think in some ways, honestly, change the beliefs that they had about what they thought that it needs to look like and what actually brought them happiness and joy and fulfillment in life, and redefining that. So kind of like different conversations, having that conversation in the first week of working, some of that going to go very well. So anyways.
Yeah. And I think as someone gets further along, there's also been upsides that they've started to notice. Because I think what can happen in the beginning, it's this fear of weight gain. It's one, like this very nebulous thing of like, I just don't know what's going to happen. But two, it feels like I'm doing this thing, like I'm just putting on weight and there's nothing to show for it. There's no upside whatsoever. And as
In
someone
fact, it
gets
probably
further,
felt worse,
yeah,
right? Those first few days of high anxiety, very uncomfortable, exhausting. It's probably like, what am I doing this for? So yeah.
Yeah, but as someone gets further along, there can be the recognition of, yeah, actually, I am more confident in work. I'm able to concentrate better. I've been having more freedom to be able to go out and do these meals. It's actually, I mean, it feels weird to admit this, but it feels nice to not be exercising the way that I was. And so you can start to say, well, look, as you said, like this is a package deal. Like you're having that occur with all of this wrapped in because this is what needs to happen as part of the recovery process. And so it's like, yeah, look, you can not like certain aspects of this, and I get it, but I also think that there's a lot of benefits you're noticing with this. And I think then the other piece I would say as well is I actually think there is something about going past where your expectations were that is really freeing. Because up until
That's where
some
the weight
point,
gain, the fear of weight gain goes away at that place.
totally. Because up until some point, you're still holding on to something. There's still the, well, I mean, if I get the restriction, we can still like just shoehorn it under this amount. And like once you go past the point of what I think is accessible, like we're not connected to any of that anymore. I'm not trying to do that anymore because this has been blown out of the water. And I think most people think that's going to be absolutely terrifying and where things go off the deep end. And actually, that's where the freedom really is. Because you're like, okay, now I'm not
Absolutely.
trying to hold on to anything.
I have this big smile on my face because I remember that feeling. Like I remember just being like, I'm free. No one's commenting on my body anymore. I can have rules. No one like I don't care. Like it was just this like incredible freeing feeling. But I think had I not gone past like the point you're talking about, where I thought I should be, a place I never thought I'd ever go, because I was willing to go there and I was determined because I knew my brain wasn't right still and I kept going. Literally, that is where like the treasure lies. That is where that freedom was. And so if you're tiptoeing to this place of like, okay, this is it, and I cut it off, it's not going to happen. Again, the reason you're cutting off is that fear of weight gain. You got to run straight into that fear. And back to like this package deal we're talking about, you don't get a custom or handpick this package. It's not like, okay, I like this. You're like, you're picking out a gift like this and this. I'll put in the bag. It's like, it just comes. It's just done. Like the package is there. You don't get to pick, like, I want all the freedom and I don't want to experience discomfort getting there. And those two aren't going to work. It's just like you sign up for it and you know those things are going to come and just know you'll get through them. And you'll be so glad that you did. So,
yeah. No, I totally agree. Anything else on the weight gain piece or body image piece?
I mean, I think we could talk for, hours on it and people would probably listen to that because it has to do with weight gain, but I think we should move on.
Okay, cool. So then the next one is extreme hunger. And so I think this comes up a lot. There's a lot of fear connected to this in the same way as there's fear around weight gain. So again, I'm just going to start it open. Yeah. What do you think people should know about extreme hunger?
Extreme hunger is going to make you feel like an absolute crazy person. When you lift the restrictions that you had and suddenly anything and everything is free to eat, it's a scary feeling, but it's also like really fun if you allow it to be. If you're determined to recover, you know these things have to be eaten and these fears have to be overcome. It's kind of fun. I mean, honestly, it's like, well, why would I not eat something I thought about? Why would I not have that thing? Yes, yes, yes. Basically, it was a game of yes for me. Anytime I saw food, I was saying yes. And genuinely, I was like, yeah, I do want it. And that went on for months and months and months for me. The physical extreme hunger, much shorter periods for me. Much shorter. I mean, I maybe a couple of months, maybe the physical. And then it just was like straight up fullness with intense mental hunger for like 8 months, 10 months, maybe. A very long period of just like, oh man, I haven't had a hunger signal in months. Like it just really was a fed state for so long that I think I allowed being in that fed state of when your brain is changing. Anytime that you're allowing yourself to kind of dip back into that deficit, we're having to do a lot of work to get ourselves back into that place where your brain's in like a prime position to be able to learn to think a different way. And so, in one sense, extreme hunger will make you feel absolutely crazy and insane. But if you're doing it right, that's how you should feel.
Yeah. And I think, like, as you said, it can be this wonderful freeing time. I know for many clients who are working from like a practical standpoint, that could be tough. Of like, okay, I'm trying to do my job and then I'm trying to eat. And I understand that. I mean, I think there are times where there are excuses around that, and there are times where it's like it's just legitimately hard to do this because of your job. And I totally do get that piece. And I also think it's so necessary. Like your body is asking for this energy for a real legitimate reason. For a very long time, depending on how long this has been going on, it could be a couple of years, it could be a couple of decades. Like in your case, your body has not been getting what it needs. And there is a huge amount of debt that accrues because of that. There's a huge amount of repair work that your body has been unable to do, organ systems being turned down and off. Like it's crucial to have this energy come in to allow your body to repair. And I think people mistakenly think like, but I can't need this much energy today. And it's like, no, you don't need this much energy today, but you need this much energy today plus the last 2 decades of restriction that has occurred. But two, I think there's this fear because of how often recovery is talked about that at some point I need to restrict again. Like I'm going to need to put the brakes on. And I think this puts a lot of fear into people. One, of like, how am I going to know when to put the brakes on? But two, there's this fear of I'm not going to do that extreme eating piece in the right way. Like I'm going to miss out on things. Like I've had clients be in this huge dilemma around like, but I'm going to miss my window of doing it absolutely perfectly. Because at some point I'm like, of course, I'm going to just have to start doing restriction again. I was like, no, you don't. That's not where this ends. It's not how it goes. But I think that's a real worry for a lot of people incorrectly that then keeps them stuck.
Yeah. Majority of people gain weight without doing much rewiring, to be honest, in my experience. Like really the real rewiring comes when the weight is on, like we talked about. You're in a place that you never thought you'd be, and you're still doing your recovery commitments and you're still eating unrestrictedly. So if you're in that place, you're like, oh my gosh, I have not done this correctly. I have not rewired perfectly. I was not doing all this things and I gained this weight. Now what? Well, now what is you continue perfecting that unrestricted eating for life mentality, right? You continue doing that. I think also when it comes to extreme hunger, I think it's important to talk about. I'm not one that's like, oh, don't talk about that, that'll trigger them, or oh, don't talk about that, that will scare them from doing it. Like, let's just put it out there so you know what to expect. Often when you have extreme hunger, the first couple of weeks we call it the honeymoon phase, right? It's like, this is incredible. My pants still fit me, right? I have not noticed many changes. I'm eating all this food. Recovery this is working. I love this. And then the weight comes on, right? And then those sessions are a little bit more filled with dread and fear and doubt, and everything about what they were doing changed only because their body's now changing.
Yeah.
Even though they're starting to feel life come back into them and they're feeling this kind of excitement about eating again, all of a sudden it's like screeching on the brakes. Oh my gosh, what is going on? So just know when you embark on recovery, unrestricted eating is going to cause your body to change because you've been restricting it. right? And just accepting that fact and knowing at some point that's going to happen, whether it's day one or a month or two in, it's going to happen. And you got to gear up and prepare yourself to be like, I'm plowing through it. It's going to happen. And I've already made up my mind. I'm still going when it happens.
Yeah.
Because people get caught off guard and they have no tools in their belt. They have no way to handle it other than to react and run back.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to understand the order of healing that the body takes. Like if I was designing recovery and knowing what everyone's fear is, I would design it in a completely different way, because it does make it really hard. That
So
in a
hard.
lot of ways, after that honeymoon phase, if someone gets that the body does prioritize weight gain, and it does prioritize weight gain around the abdomen, and that can be such a hard thing for people. And that, hey, I now feel like I've been hit by a bus after when I'm doing this. And like, yeah, there's a lot of changes that take place in an order you don't want to. And really, so much of the neural rewiring and the shifts in someone's mind and perspective is in the latter stages. That sucks, because it is in a lot of ways in a leap of faith for long periods, or for periods where, okay, I'm noticing these glimmers or this little upside, but I mean, I'm still doing something that I'm deathly afraid of. But as you keep going, it does happen. Like it does change. And I think the thing I always talk about, it's not it might, it's like, no, if you do this, it will happen. Like I'm so convinced of like full recovery will happen if you do these things.
Yeah. If you never listen to your eating disorder again, you won't have an eating disorder. I mean, like, how will you have an eating disorder? How will you have those thoughts if you haven't acted on them in months and years? Why? Your brain is not stupid. It's not going to keep throwing out thoughts you're not responding to. And so your brain does change. In terms of, I just wanted to say one other thing. What was it? Weight gain. I was going to say something else about it. Oh, that was it. Initial weight gain will come on, not always, but often very fast, right? Like you said, around the abdomen, really fast. My face looked like I got stung by a bee. Like it really, for me, it got really puffy pretty fast. And I know that people, and I did the same thing, this rate of weight gain in a week, right? It's going to be more 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. That weight gain is going to be way more than you wanted it to be, I'll be honest, if you're doing it right. But that rate of weight gain is something you don't need to worry about, because I don't want you to pull back the extreme eating because you saw that huge shoot up, in your body over the course of a week or two. You've got to trust that by doing that is how eventually you're not going to want to eat 20,000 calories a day. The only way you're ever going to not want to be doing that every day and actually have other interests in your life is to, in fact, buckle down and accept that extreme hunger and dive into it and just allow it to be. Don't judge it.
Yeah. In the beginning, so much of it is water weight that is changing. It's electrolyte. Like there's lots of reasons why there's this very initial bump, even when someone hasn't made a massive change. Like I think that like people get so into the calorie math of like, oh, I only put in this little extra and this has already happened. And if I extrapolate that out, it's like it doesn't. You're not an abacus. Your body does work in more complex ways than this. And in the beginning, your body is prioritizing weight gain really above all else. And then as you keep going, more of that is being used to do the repair work, because your body realizes, oh, okay, cool, this is continuing to come into a famine. But in the beginning, people always talk about, I can't trust my body. And I was like, can you demonstrate to your body that is able to trust you as the person who is providing the energy or is choosing to go for a run or a walk or whatever it is? Like, how would your recovery change if you prioritize the idea of, I need to show my body unconditionally that it can trust me, and I'm going to do that for 6 months or a year and see where I end up, and what is the feedback and the signals that my body's getting, as opposed to I need my body to constantly show me that it can be trusted before I make any first move.
Totally. I think what happens when I get in a conversation with someone, no answer I give them about what's, why their body needs it, there's no convincing. There's no convincing someone that they actually need that energy. No convincing. I mean, I've heard everything, and no matter what my response is, as logical that is, it doesn't sink in. And so at that point, I'm like, can we focus on rewiring?
Yeah.
Can we just focus on, right? Because if we do that, you're going to get somewhere. but nothing I'm going to say to you right now about weight gain is going to sit with you. You're not going to accept it. And so this, again, that tool back at the beginning of this weight gain. Oh, we're talking about that again. Remember, we're going to shift back over to rewiring what we need to do actually with our actions to get that to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I understand that so much of what we're covering today for many people will just go in one ear and out the other because you're not in a state that you're able to hear it properly, or you're not in a state where your mind and the eating disorder doesn't generate all of these counter arguments about why they don't know what they're talking about, or that thing's not true, or that might have happened for Becky, but that's not going to happen for me. And like all of that is going to come up. And so for me, my response is, you've run this other experiment. Let's try this other way and see what happens. Like maybe I'm wrong, but let's run this experiment and then we can both see what happens. Like I would prefer to talk about what happened and the reality of that, as opposed to us both like banding about different theories of what we think is going to happen, because no one's going to win that game, and we're not going to get any. You're not going to get any.
Eating disorder will always have something to say about it, for sure. Absolutely. I keep having thoughts and then I forget it, and I'm sorry. I told you this before I started recording. Hazel was up all night stick. So I'm like, come on, brain, work for me. Oh, I can't remember what I was going to say. Something about rewiring. Anyways, we can continue if it comes out. It'll come up again because it's come up like 3 times now and I've forgotten each time. So it'll come up before we finish, but we can keep moving along.
Okay, cool. I think then also connected to this idea of extreme hunger is conversations around mental hunger. And I think what I often hear or see is people very much disregarding mental hunger. And unless I've got the most obvious punch in the face physical symptoms that are telling me I'm hungry, it's not real hunger. And it's just like, yeah, I thought about that food, but that doesn't really mean it's real hunger. So yeah, tell me your thoughts on mental hunger and how you have this conversation with people.
Mental hunger is what got me recovered. Like if you're just giving yourself permission to eat when you feel physical hunger, again, like you're giving yourself what, like a week or a few months feeling that, and then if you're not recovered, it didn't work. Like you are going to feel physically full for a very good amount of your recovery while the rewiring is still going on. And that is going to be manifested through mental hunger. The mental hunger is actually what's carrying you through the process that it takes to fully rewire. No way, no how can someone have the mental hunger, physical hunger line up perfectly. And it's like, oh my gosh, I started feeling full and totally content, satisfied. I didn't think about eating for hours. It never works that way. It's always like, oh my gosh, I'm full. And I'm super disappointed and frustrated that I still want to eat so much food. This is not working. There's a panic that goes on, and there's just like kind of a disconnect where your body's not quite where it wants to be yet. The reason it's still asking you to eat more food, even though it's full, because it still needs it. And again, no one's going to believe that. It's listening to me. It doesn't need it. I already gained so much weight. All the stuff is going to go on right then. When I say this, their eating disorder is going to snatch that thought and turn it around. So what I'm going to say to that person is, how is their rewiring going? Do you have any eating disorder thoughts anymore? Do you feel totally free? Do you still fear weight gain, right? Remember, our goal was that you hired me so we could rewire your brain. And so why are we talking about the fact that it's not fair that you still are thinking about food even though you're full and you gained weight? So again, I feel like the only answer I've ever been able to come up with an answer to all of these hard questions is influencing any kind of emotions or actions. They cannot answer yes to that. They wouldn't still be talking to me, right? Clearly, there's still things they need to work on, and that's why that mental hunger is still driving them to do so. So that's, to me, mental hunger is the most valuable hunger. It's the most important one that you listen to. That's your body's way of trying to get you to trust it again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that explanation, and I love that way of reframing. And I think for a lot of people, there's this hierarchy of like physical hunger is more important, mental hunger is, well, it's not so much important, or maybe that's leading me to be an emotional leader, or all of those kind of things. And it's just mental hunger and physical hunger are both feedbacks from your body that, hey, I need to eat and I need energy. And yeah, there can be situations where, as you talk about, like you're really full, but as I mentioned before, you can be really full because that's just the capacity of something in your stomach at that moment, but you have this huge energy debt that you need to pay off. And so we still need more energy to come in. And for so often, your digestive system is still trying to catch up with the fact that there is more food coming in, and it hasn't had the resources to be able to function properly. And so there can be this lag between your body's capacity and what you actually need. And the way to get past that is actually by bringing more food in. And so, yeah, I think
absolutely. Or not to mention anxiety.
yeah,
It's a huge
totally.
factor in fullness. Like I would say that's the primary thing that people are running into problems with. Oh, I'm full. It's like, will you test that? Will you just, if you had to, like your life's on the line, your kid's life's on the line. Could you eat more? Just experiment with that, see what happens. And they do. And then all of a sudden, like, that made me hungrier. Oh my gosh, what in the world? They plowed through that like anxiety that while they were hitting, and all of a sudden they realized like that's actually not fullness. That feeling, that heavy feeling in your stomach, I know what that feeling is. I used to have it all the time. I always had that feeling. And so when you're eating in recovery, eating slightly more, it's like, whoa, I'm so full. Yes, there's some, GI issues that are going on. And yes, there's high levels of food going in, but also there's that anxiety piece. And so remember, like, fullness is something that shouldn't necessarily stop you. I've talked about where I would eat and eat and eat and eat and eat until I literally was like, I have to lay down now for a little bit. And I'd be frustrated at that, right? And be frustrated about the fact that I had to lay down. But that was how I, again, had that mindset of as soon as I could eat again, I'm going to get up and keep eating. As soon as I get up again, I'm going to keep eating. So, yeah, that is obviously, I won't deny. Does it feel better to eat when you feel some physical hunger? Yeah, it does. But unfortunately, like, recovery is not, again, it's a package. You don't get to choose that. Well, I'll recover and I'll only eat when I feel physical hunger. Again, it's not going to get you very far. And so, unfortunately, you're going to have to eat when you're full. That's the reality. And you're going to have to stop touching it. And you're going to have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And it's in that space, like you said, it's in that space where your brain settles down, your body finds this new homeostasis, and you're able to have thoughts outside of food. But if you're unwilling to go through that phase, your brain's still going to be scared there's not enough food. So lots of uncomfortable things. And I wish that you could wake up and feel totally not afraid of weight gain anymore and totally like clear-headed and rewired, and then say, I always tell people, like, you don't have to trust me. I'm some rando person on YouTube. You've never met me in person, right? You don't have to trust me. You're asking a lot of questions like you don't trust me though, right? Why are you following my channel? Why are you hiring me as a coach? Something deep down inside of you knows this makes sense, right? Something is just like enough for you to continue to make comments or to continue to watch the videos. If I watch something that I totally disagree with and I just think is like completely erroneous, I'm not following that channel. This is outside of eating this sort of stuff. Like, are you following stuff? You're like, this is bogus. The person, I have no idea what they're talking about, but I think I'll keep following them and watching their videos every day. There is a reason why you're gravitating and listening and seeking out this information. It's because it makes sense, right? It's really not like rocket science. It makes really, really logical sense, but can feel very difficult.
Yeah. I'm totally on board with that. And I think it's really highlighting like there is something in you that is pulling you towards this, that is telling you this is something I need to pay attention to. And I think just coming back to something you said earlier, where I used the analogy of recovery is like rehab. Like if you've been hit by a car and you're needing to learn how to walk, that is what recovery is like. And you're going to have to do things as part of that process that regular people don't have to do. And yeah, it's annoying that I'm having to do these exercises that are excruciatingly painful to relearn how to walk. I wish I could just walk. And I think for so many people, there's this feeling of, I just want to be a normal eater. I just want to go from having an eating disorder for 20 years to just being like everyone else in the office who's a regular eater. And it's like, that's just not possible. You've been hit by the car and you need to do the rehab. And so one, it means that there's going to be things that are painful or uncomfortable that you have to do. But two, you're going to have to do things that other people don't have to do because they're not going through the same thing that you're doing. And I think so often the conversations around nutrition and health and all of that stuff that people get sucked into in recovery loses the context of the fact that but you have an eating disorder. What you
Right.
need to do is different to what some other person needs to do who doesn't have an eating disorder. And what's often recommended for that person, I also disagree with. But let's just
Right. I was
use
going to say,
your
half the time,
reality.
those people, yeah, half the time, those people that you're calling normal eaters or normal people are disordered eaters too. But the difference between you and them is you're trying to recover and they're not.
Yeah.
Right. And so whenever someone starts a sentence, also with normal people, like we got to get that out of our mindset because you're not a normal person right now. You're recovering from an eating disorder. So the comparison thing is never going to be helpful if you're comparing to someone who, in fact, is a normal, like, healthy minded person versus someone who's disordered. Neither of those are you because you're someone with an eating disorder who is in recovery. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I have just a few more minutes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think the normal person that people always refer to is typically the person who's eating the least. Like when you go and meet someone who orders a double portion for lunch and then has dessert, are you referring to them as a normal person and saying, okay, I need to do the exact same thing as them? There's
Yeah,
just
it kind
always
of
this.
shifts and bends as this, convenient for the eating disorder's agenda. It's incredible. Like I wish I was that ingenious in other aspects of my life to think on my feet like that. But man, my eating disorder is so good. It was just natural to spit out of my mouth, right? And so you have to become aware, like, okay, actually, there's a double standard here. Or actually, no, I can't buy into those thoughts anymore. So, anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, I have a few more minutes. I have a son who's called me about 4 or 5 times getting a ride home from school. So I have a few more minutes. If you want to pick like I don't know, the things that might be most important to touch on before we.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just really one final piece,
Awesome.
and I think you've done a number of different videos on this, which is recovery trip tips for where to get started. And so you don't have to remember every tip you've ever given connected to this, but what comes to mind if you were to say, okay, cool, these are some things to get started with and run with, and maybe things that we haven't hit at this point. So I think everything we've hit today is going to be relevant in some way to this, but whatever we hit that seems like it's really useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we already touched on the mindset. That's the first thing. You can do a list. I could give you a list of 100 things to set you up to recover, but if your mindset is such that I need a lot more food than I've ever eaten in my life, none of that's going to do anything, right? So with that being said, some things that I would say setting yourself up for success. And so in regards to your environment and your support system, let's start with environment. Get all the safe foods out of your house, right? An alcoholic's trying to stop drinking. Are they going to just keep, bottles of beer in the fridge and hope for success? It's not going to work. So get those safe foods, the ones you gravitate to, the default foods, the ones you eat a lot of before you actually the challenging food. Get them out of your house. It'll be free. It'll be scary. It'll feel like I'm asking you to give away a child. But when you do that, it opens up like, wow, there's some empty spaces here I need to fill with challenging food. And then the decision is a lot easier when it comes time to eat. Oh, do I have the sweet potato or should I have like the white bread? Should I have the sweet potato? I really want white bread. The sweet potatoes are going to go bad. It's just gone. They're gone. And they're not haunting you anymore. And you don't have to even worry about putting them in your day. Just focus on hopefully a list you've made of all the foods you do need to challenge, right? Or maybe make a list of safe foods. That would probably be a list that could be effective as well. And just don't have those in your house. Then everything else is stuff you need to challenge. As far as exercise goes and environment, if you have a gym pass, obviously, just continue it. If you have gym equipment and you can get it out of the house, do that. I think though, if you can withstand like having, an exercise machine in your house, let's say you walk by it every single day and you're covering in cold turkey, that is some good rewiring, right? So I'm not opposed to like allowing these triggers to be there and then saying absolutely not. I actually just remember as we're talking, I remember sitting in front of, we had like a little home gym, and I remember having these rows of weights stacked. And I remember I was cold turkey and I so badly, it had been weeks and I just wanted to I just really wanted to go lift. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to conquer this head on. I'm going to sit in front of those weights and I'm just going to stare at them. And I did. I sat right in front of them. I remember this. And I was just like, wow, have you guys had so much power over me? Oh my gosh, I can't believe these like pieces of rubber and metal have taken so much from my life. I cannot believe that I am like married to these weights. And I just stood there. I sat there and I just kept looking at him. And it was incredible what happened. The urge and like, I have to was like repulsive. Like I did not want to. I was like, ooh, that does not sit well with me. I'm not touching those. And like that, just that exercise of being able to do that, like mentally and just facing it head on was really helpful for me throughout recovery. So I started associating those for that time while I was in recovery, something that really wasn't actually bringing me happiness. But I had never actually sat down and just accepted these are not healthy for me right now. These are something that cannot be in my life right now. Similar to like when my husband would go exercise, right? Some people would say like, oh, your spouse would support you. And down, it's like, actually, in real life, your spouse might exercise. You might choose not to, right? You gotta sit with that and like, it's okay. But in the initial stages, maybe you're not quite at that place where setting yourself up with having these temptations out for a little bit would be a good thing. So you know yourself and you know it's, you know, obviously trial and error. If one method's not working, try another one. In terms of support people, if you have people in your life that you're like, you know, I can tell them everything and anything, and they're super supportive and they're great, you know, like positive influence on me, people you respect, people you know who have their heads screwed on straight, that have their values and priorities in place, you know, someone like that, talk to them, reach out to them, bring them in. And if it's something you're like, I would never do that. I know them. I'm thinking about that person. They were never like, oh, I don't know them that well. Well, then think about what are the attributes or characteristics you like in that person that make you want to be that make you feel that way about that person. When you think of someone you really respect, admire, all those things, think about what are those things. Oh, well, they're a great listener. Oh, well, they're always there to help me. They're more than willing to do anything I ask. Yeah. Or, oh, this person is a leader or they're inspiring. Whatever it is, focus on, okay, that's what I want for myself. I'm going to start trying to focus on and acquire these characteristics that I've never had with an Venus. Or you can't always be there to help someone be a Venus, or no way. You can't be a good listener. You're thinking about cheeseburgers and pizza. Like there are so many things that when you actually are like, I'm moving my disorder aside and I'm thinking about what I actually want in my life that will come up, that will help you to feel that kind of intrinsic drive, face recovery head on and just go for it. Yeah, I think getting started again, you can watch, I've regurgitated the same information in all of my videos multiple times, but really it's getting in that mindset and just feeling unstoppable and really wanting it for yourself. It's going to be
nice. I think that's great. And I do highly recommend that people go and watch your videos. And yeah, this one, I know you've done different versions of that same one many, many times. Look, I know you need to shoot off. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's, as I said at the start, long overdue. I'm so glad we got to do it. Where can people go if they want to find out more about you?
Really just my YouTube channel. I mean, I have a coaching website. You asked about my training at the beginning. I don't have any training, and I'm very open about that. I'm very, like, people have asked, do you have any kind of coaching certificate? No, I don't. I don't feel like that's something I feel like that would take away from what I do as a coach and what I feel like is very helpful for helping people throughout recovery. That actually like the tangible things that people need to be successful in recovery. I don't feel like I need a coaching certificate. So people that do want someone who's certified, I absolutely think that they should. And I'm sure there are great coaches that are. But YouTube is pretty much how I do, you know, any kind of marketing. That's all I can really do is that channel, and lots of free information. If you really wanted to recover, you don't need for coach, you definitely have all the information you need to be able to do so in my videos. And your podcast, obviously. And your podcast also is incredibly invaluable information that can help people. So yeah, other than my coaching website, if you want to schedule, it's just YouTube.
Okay.
It's another video or interviews or whatever, other people. But yeah, I would say it's the majority of where you find me on YouTube.
Perfect. Well, I'll put in the show notes, I'll put your YouTube and I'll put your website. And yeah, thanks for sharing all your wisdom on the channel and coming on and doing this today.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
You're welcome. So that was my conversation with Becky Freestone. I really love what she's doing. I think she's a great voice in the eating disorder world. If you liked what you heard from Becky today and you're not already following her on Instagram, then or not Instagram, maybe on Instagram, but I meant YouTube. If you're not already following her on YouTube, then I highly recommend that you do. As I said in the intro, I think she's got over 300 videos and they're all fairly short in the whole scheme of things, 5, 7, 10 minutes long, but with a very good, clear message in each one of them. And so if you're not following her and you want more of this information coming into you on a regular basis, then I would highly recommend following her channel. As I said at the top, I'm currently taking on new clients. If you're wanting help to reach a place of full recovery, I would love to be able to support you and help you to get there. You can send an email to info@7-health.com and put coaching in the subject line. So that is it for this week's show. I hope that you found it valuable. I know there was so many insights that Becky shared, and I suspect you're going to have got a lot out of this episode. I'll be back with another new show next week. Until then, take care of yourself, and I will see you soon.